The next major thing we can ask is what's the probability that this happens and this happens, that two things both happen. So we can go back to our example. If we flip a coin, we flip a dime, and we flip a nickel. So as we said, we can write that down as, well, first, let's say we'll deal with the dime. We get a heads or tails from our dime. And then from our nickel, we get either a tails. So this means that if we end up here, that means dime tails and then nickel tails. Or we could have nickel heads and dime tails. And here we have the same thing, nickel tails and dime heads, because we have dime heads and then nickel tails, and then we have nickel heads and dime heads. So then if we want to calculate the probability that we get both of these things, right, so this would mean that we get tails on both of our coins, then we can calculate that by multiplying things together. And so on each one of these nodes, each one of these lines, we can write down our probabilities. So we have a 1/2 chance we get a dime, a head with our dime, a tail or a heads with our dimes. And then once we flip the nickel, again, we get the same situation. So up here, this is when we flip the nickel, when we get a tail for dimes. This is when we flip the nickel, when we get a heads for dimes. And so in each case, this is 1/2. And so we can calculate the probabilities. We're going to multiply together. So we start here, and then we would say, okay, 1/2 times 1/2. And so we get 1/4. So in general, if we want to know the probability of some event 1 and event 2, that's going to be equal to the probability of 1 and probability of 2. And so we can also do that by the pie chart method. So that would mean that we draw the pie chart, and now we're just going to subdivide it each time we do something. So first we flip the dime, and then we either get dime tails or we get dime heads. And then, so for each side, so if we get dime tails, now we're going to flip the nickel, and we get either nickel tails or we get nickel heads. And then over here, if we get dime heads, we're going to divide it again, and now we either get nickel tails or dime heads, nickel heads. So in this case, what we've done is we've taken our whole and we've multiplied it by 1/2, or divided it in 2 each time. And so we can see that if we need the probability of 1 and 2, we're going to multiply them.